Hello and welcome to Real Menopause Talk. My guest today is Donna Klassen. Donna is co-founder of Let's Talk Menopause over in the US, and she dedicates herself to providing a platform that educates, destigmatizes, and offers vital community support surrounding menopause. Her site and her webinars are fantastic, and I cannot recommend them highly enough. She and I may have different experiences of menopause, but we both come at it with the same heart and a desire to ensure nobody feels alone during this deeply nuanced life transition. In this episode, we have a lot to discuss about the stigma that remains around menopause, about women's health, and of course, her own experience. Donna is all about the very simple but powerful and. Nothing need be one or the other. It can be many things at the same time. And this is especially true when it comes to menopause symptoms, and in fact this whole life phase, which is a time of vulnerability and opportunity. Opportunity and change requires a whole different set of tools, which is why I would like to offer you real menopause therapy. Naming what is troubling you and having someone help you see it for what it is can change the way you feel completely. Subscription is free. You can sign up and enjoy half an hour for free as well, and you get to hand-pick your specialized menopause therapist based on matching your own concerns with their expertise. No obligation, no tie-in, just therapy that fits into your schedule and can bring you back to the real and fabulous you. Go to bit.ly/RM therapy, that's bit.ly/RM therapy, capital R, capital M, capital T, or go to the clickable link in the show notes. And now, the moment you've been waiting for, Donna Klassen. Donna, it is a pleasure to meet you. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. Would you like to start by telling everybody a little bit about yourself, your family, where you grew up, just so people get a picture of who you are?
Great. So my name is Donna Klassen, and I am a social worker by trade. I grew up in New York, in Long Island. I'm one of four, the youngest. I have two sisters. And I grew up in Long Island and then went to Rochester when I was 14, so upstate New York. And then college in Pennsylvania, and then I landed back here, and I've lived in Brooklyn for 30-something years. I'm married, and I have four daughters, ages 17 to 24.
That's a lot. I've only got two, 17 to 12, or 17 and 12. But yes, how wonderful. And do they appreciate what you do?
I think that they do. They certainly do now. They're incredibly proud of the work that I've been doing to raise awareness about menopause and the whole menopause transition. And I know that they will be very happy when their menopause experience is different from the millions of women right now who are not getting the care or the information that they need. So they are very proud.
I'm sure they are. And yes, we will get onto that, how the future generations are going to handle perimenopause, menopause in all its forms. But for you, how was it? As I understand it, you had surgical menopause, which needs far more attention than it tends to get. How prepared were you and how was it?
So I would say that I was probably a little bit more prepared than most because of my work doing reproductive mental health. So prior to starting Let's Talk Menopause, I was working in a day program, a day hospital for pregnant and postpartum women experiencing acute symptoms of depression and anxiety. And so certainly I have an understanding of the mental health impact that these hormonal transitions, happen. Both my mother and my sister had surgical menopause as well. And one of the stories that I tell is that the word menopause was never mentioned in my house. But my father did drive me to school one day, which was unusual. And he told me to make sure that I was nice to my mother during that time because she was having surgery and having her ovaries out and having a full hysterectomy, actually. Although he never said hysterectomy, it just wasn't it wasn't said that way. I knew it. And I know that my mother was more emotional. And my sister actually never told us that she had a hysterectomy, which I thought was so surprising and just so interesting, right? That she didn't feel like she could share that with us. And my experience has been to move into a completely different direction, and I've become much more open. Clearly, I've told my story multiple times. It's on the website. People can read about it, and I've fully embraced the experience. It was different, although I was 52, so I was experiencing a lot of perimenopause symptoms, including some brain fog, fatigue, increased irritability, and some joint pain. I think joint pain was probably one of the perimenopause symptoms that I had a lot of. And then I had my ovaries out 1 week prior to a double mastectomy, and I immediately had hot flashes throughout the day. Not able to even count them. I mean, there were so many. And then once I was put on an aromatase inhibitor, which blocks all of your estrogen, so it's really like menopause on steroids, because you go then have no estrogen at all. Because post ovaries, your brain and your adrenal, your body still makes some estrogen postmenopause. So that is really when I had a lot of symptoms, and I ended up having to leave my job because I was so tired and I was hungry a lot, and that was very distracting. That was a symptom that I had. And I gained a lot of weight, about 20 pounds probably 10 pounds in the first year and another 10 pounds in the second year. And, but most of all, I would say word finding and cheerfulness. So I was running staff meetings, running group supervision, and all of a sudden I would start crying, which was just not me. That had never happened to me before. And I just felt very, very overwhelmed as well. And so I ended up leaving my job. And this is actually a month before the pandemic. So this is February of 2020. And I told my daughter that I was going to start something on menopause. She was probably about 18 or 19 at the time. And she said to me, "Mom, maybe you need to get it together a little bit first before you start something." As she saw me crying almost every day. And so I did. And then the idea, and I've always been somebody who thinks about what needs to happen. I'm an activist. I'm an organizer in addition to being a therapist. And I just sort of put myself out there. And I think that's really what people need to do, is own it. Own what's going on, not be afraid of it, fully embrace it as this is a stage of life. And you may have some symptoms, and you may have a little bit, and you may have a lot. And there's treatment, and you can get better. And there's multiple things that you can do. It's not just one thing.
Has your sister spoken to you since about why she chose not to talk to you about her hysterectomy?
I think that she felt embarrassed. And I think that she didn't want people to see her as less of a woman, which is what I think happens to people. I think that this marks a time of the end of your reproductive years. And I think for many of us, for many people, it can be feared, and it can, mean like a loss of who you are as a woman, right? So we've talked since about it. So I'm hoping that, people like her will embrace it and do it differently. Because I don't think I think the more you talk about it and the more you put it out there, the easier the transition is.
Well, normalizing it was certainly part of the reason that I started this podcast as well. I'm sure with you, the vast majority of people I know, and even who I've interviewed, none of us had any idea what was happening to us when we were in perimenopause, and had to do some detective work ourselves and work out, and still continue to work out how to manage symptoms. And then with surgical menopause, again, so many women haven't been informed as to what is going to happen to them or how they might feel afterwards, and the impact and the sudden onset of menopause.
Yeah.
And then around that, there is the lack of talking. In some areas, it is still a taboo subject, and people have every right to be personal and have boundaries around it. But being able to talk about it freely is really the top goal. So yes, I hope very much that anyone going to have a hysterectomy is comfortable with sharing that. It doesn't mean they are any less of a woman or a human, and they need support.
I agree.
What did you do to look after yourself afterwards? How did you manage your symptoms?
So I was lucky because I was working with reproductive psychiatrists, some of the best in the United States. And I remember one of them turned to me and she said, we were in the kitchen and I was trying to figure out what to eat. And I was just very confused about what to do next which was not like me. And she just sort of put her hand on my shoulder and she's like, Donna, she's like, are you okay? And I was like, no, Liz, I'm not okay. And so she reminded me that I was getting my care through Mount Sinai and that they had psychiatrists there. And so I started seeing a psychiatrist and going on medication, gabapentin. That helps with hot flashes because I can't take hormone therapy, so gabapentin to sleep because my sleep was broken, and so as we know, sleep is everything. It affects so much of it affects everything, right? It affects your ability to function, it affects mental health, your energy levels, your cognitive functioning, and Pristique, which is it's an SNRI, which also it's a form of effexor, which helps with some of the hot flashes so well, and really helped with the irritability, I will say. And really helped with the mood stabilization. And I had not been on antidepressants before, so no prior history. And so I went on it, and it was, for me, the perfect thing to do. I left this very stressful job, and I restarted my private practice, so I had more time and I had less stress. I went to physical therapy, and it was a little bit difficult during the pandemic, but I did have some residual shoulder issues because of the surgery. And so I started doing online. Actually, I had this wonderful physical therapist who did therapy, who did medical yoga with me. Then I started doing Pilates. And so, just really taking better care of myself. During those years where I was at the Motherhood Center, I really was more outward, facing and really not balancing, taking care of myself with work.
Women's reproductive health in general needs more attention as well, I feel, than it currently gets, certainly here in the UK. Was menopause part of that?
You mean part of it at the Motherhood Center?
Yeah.
So interestingly, no. And I've been actually thinking a lot about that lately because, one of the things that we know is that women, the hormone shifts are really what cause a lot of the increased anxiety and mental health symptoms. And that's why, the onset of the period, women are vulnerable. And then, the period, so the last week, week or two prior, and that's when the hormone levels fluctuate. They go up and down, the estrogen levels. And so we know a lot more now about postpartum depression and anxiety. Still, there's a long way to go there. And yet what we don't know is that perimenopause is that third window of vulnerability, that some women are just more susceptible to those changes in those hormone shifts. For me, I didn't have any of those experiences during those first two phases, but I did during that last phase. So it's important to note your history, right? So if you have a history of that, that's certainly you're at more risk. And you can also be at risk if you don't. And it looks different. And people don't know sometimes, like the irritability, people don't know that's a symptom. And oftentimes what happens is, you get irritable and then you think like, oh my gosh, I'm such a bad person. What's wrong with me? I've never been like this. I'm so mad at my partner, my kids. I don't want to be around them anymore. And then they think that that's them instead of thinking of it as a symptom.
And the mental health side of it, so understanding anxiety and panic attacks, even depression, is often, or the depth of the symptoms, the depth of the anxiety is often very, very underrated. Recently here, we had new NICE guidelines come out that included CBT, which I think is wonderful. And many of us think is a great addition to anybody's toolbox, particularly in this period of life. However, it has become something that is now a tool to fight against one another. So you have your hormone therapy lobby and your mental therapy lobby, and it's either one or the other, when actually it's really meant to enhance one another, or for those who choose not to or who are unable to take hormone therapy, CBT can help enormously with some symptoms, maybe not every one of them, but again, it's a tool in the toolbox. Do you have the same, this party versus this party in the States, and what is the approach to mental health?
So interesting. So you all are way ahead of us. We're not there in any way. And I will say, just to sort of reflect on what's going on there, I did not know that. And I'm so impressed that that's part of the guidelines. I think that's amazing. One of the skills of DBT, which is a form of CBT, right? It's a little bit of a different modality, is the end. that two things could be true or three things could be true at once, right?
Right.
And so I wonder if that's a way to sort of, include the end. It's an and, it's not an or, right? And that people actually need to make the choices that are best for them and that make sense for them. And so I hope that that fight doesn't, figures its way out. I think here we are still at the basic education. And I will say that maybe what the conflict is getting over the WHI study that happened in 2002 and the fear of breast cancer. And as somebody who has breast cancer, I certainly wish that I could take hormone therapy because of many, many reasons, long-term health risks, osteoporosis, other things, and I can't. So I don't have that choice. And I don't think that everyone should take it. I think that it's really up to them, but find out the facts and the health risks and weigh it with an informed provider, which we don't have enough of. But hopefully we will have more in the future. So that's where we are. And I think the other piece of it is this idea of doing it naturally. I think that's where our conflict is that sort of like there's people who do it hormones and there's people who do it natural, right? And I worry that here in the United States, because it's seen as such a big industry now, certainly many articles about how it's this multi-billion-dollar industry that's been untapped, that people are going to go to products that are not tested, that don't help, and spend a lot of money on those things. So I think we're not even there yet at all with the mental health piece. So again, you guys are way ahead of us in terms of being able to talk about having CBT as guidelines. Oh my gosh, that would be amazing. Because I use CBT in my private practice and it really does work in many, many, many areas. It's not everything. It's not the be all end all, like you said. It's the end. It's, I actually think everybody should get training and learn the skills of CBT.
I'm a huge advocate for therapy in whichever form suits you as a human, frankly. I think it can only really do good. There's a lot going on in the world. And so being able to talk about it or being able to see it from another point of view, being able to unpick things, it can surely be a positive.
Right. Well, one of the things about CBT, right, is, I talk to my clients about unhelpful thinking styles, right? How is your thinking impacting what's going on, right? And what you're showing there is all or nothing thinking, mm-hmm. right? You either do something all or you do nothing, right? So actually CBT would help that fight, right? Both with the end, right? And that there's nuance also, yes. right? There's nuance, right? People talk about hormone therapy and it's not that it's 100%, like there is a little bit of a risk, right? When you take estrogen and progesterone, mm-hmm. That's what the studies show. Estrogen alone actually lowers your risk of breast cancer. So if you have your uterus out, it actually lowers. But unfortunately, people don't like being uncertain about things, right? Yeah. And so tolerating uncertainty and tolerating the unknown and weighing the risks of having hot flashes, which we now know there's a link to sort of more cardiovascular issues. The risk of bones losing estrogen and having osteoporosis and hip fractures, the risks of increased UTIs, due to the genitourinary syndrome of menopause, which almost no one knows about, and is chronic and progressive. And so there's weighing risk, right? right? About not having estrogen for another 40 years, or weighing risk of having a glass of wine or not, which can actually increase your risk of breast cancer. Mm-hmm. So I guess I would say that the United States is much more of a fear-based medicine around putting something in around hormone therapy. So, really, we have a lot of work to do to educate the public about what the real risk is, to be able to talk to their doctor, to be able to make a decision that's best for them and their life and not to suffer.
We still have a long way to go in education terms. It's only really those of us, I think, who are in the land of menopause and who are studying it and investigating and researching who get to the depth of the risk to your musculoskeletal health, to your urinary tract, to all the other areas, rather than looking at it on the surface of, should I take hormones or not? But then, like you say, nuance, and every woman's experience is going to be individual because every woman is individual. And actually, I should say people, because trans menopause is another issue that there is so much for everybody to learn, I feel.
Yeah, for sure.
How did you start Let's Talk Menopause? Because it's grown. There is so many arms to it, and there is so much to explore, even on your website. Where did you begin, and how have you expanded?
So interestingly, I just started tweeting that I had something. That's actually how it started. Um, and I had bought a domain name actually years earlier. So I think that's really interesting. Not Let's Talk Menopause, but I think it was the Menopause Project. And we ended up changing it. But I put it out into the universe. I put it out, and my friends saw it. And so two of my friends became co-founders with me. And my first employer, who, when I did advocacy work around recycling and incineration or in the environment, my first job out of college, he's a nonprofit lawyer and he helped us get it started. And Samara Daly, who's the co-founder with me, and Christine McGinnis, we just got Samara said to me, this should be a nonprofit. And then we just started getting to work. And we launched in October of 2021 with over 300 subway ads in New York City that said it's not just in your head, in both English and Spanish. I will say that we reached out to two people who started something called Positivity. I don't know if you know of them, in the UK, and they had a poster that they were doing online. And so we developed a poster as well. We reach out to them, we credit them. And really, I look to the UK in the work that you were doing there through social media and connecting to them through Zoom. This is during the pandemic. But we decided to launch big, and we hired an amazing graphic designer, Stacey Geller, who put together our website. And we really wanted it to be younger, to reach a younger audience and a more diverse audience. And so if you look at the website, there are people on there. And the idea is that people could see themselves in there, that they can, we had different shapes, different ages, different colors, different, right? Like you can see yourself in there, and bold. Because I think that one of the things is that we wanted to be seen and bold. And so we went big. I think that's what people said to me. Like, they're like, if you're going to do this, go big. And I do think that having gone through menopause and having that experience made me a lot less afraid of going big. Because I think I used to worry about, well, I can't put myself out there. I'm a therapist. And what do my clients know? What if this? Or, and just sort of worrying about that piece or any sort of somehow like unknown repercussions about going online and doing that. And so I just decided I'm just going to, go big. Having my story on the website for the first time, I think, was the scariest thing for me, because I shared my story and I was vulnerable. And the more I do it, the easier it gets. So thank you. I mean, that's amazing to hear. But I do think that, with our messaging, and I wanted our messaging to be that you're not alone. You deserve better, and we can change this.
Why do you think it is that it's our generation that are so keen to change it? And with that, go bold. I know we've had enough of the faded, rather sad looking image of the midlife woman. So why are we now the ones to step up?
It's really interesting. I've thought a lot about it, and I don't know if I have the answer. I think that, as Generation X, and, as we're, women who have, worked more, we've worked and raised our kids, or chose not to have kids. And we grew up in a way that, we did have a lot more confidence than our mothers, I believe. I know I do. And so I think that's part of it, being the sort of generation that really, I know I was told, like, you're going to go to college. There's no choice. You're going to get an education. You're going to work. You're not just going to have this one role that you don't have a choice in. But I also think that we are, because of social media, the generation under us, they are bold and they are pushing us. So I know one of the people that I first connected with is Dr. Rachel Rubin in Washington, D.C. She's a urologist, and she's on social media, and she's pushed me She's one of our advisors. I talk to her all the time. And she is constantly like, she's posting, she's putting things out there. And I think they're giving us permission to do that.
Mhm.
So we're sort of straddled where we're sort of like, oh my gosh, I don't know. Should I do this? And then I see somebody younger than me doing it. And I'm like, wait a second, like, we're going to do this. We're going to lead the charge.
Yeah, and I love that. I really do, because I think that they're looking to us just as we might have looked to the generations who preceded us. And we can learn from them as much, which is something I think is really wonderful. I know I learn a lot from my daughters and their friends, and the interchange of information is going to be really helpful along the way.
I just think healthcare is going to change a little bit too, because I think that, we have to figure out a way how to get factual information out to people, because doctors don't always have the time to do that. And that they're saying the same thing over and over again. Right. And so how do we disseminate information in a way that gives people the facts, but then they can go to their doctor and talk to them about it?
I think that's one of the things that women worry about the most is, well, before I do go to the doctor, how do I go to them and talk to them about this? Because it does help if you know your symptoms and what you would like to get out of the appointment. We have very short time windows here. If you go and see your GP, it's really supposed to be 10 minutes. And there's a lot to unpack when it comes to all the symptoms. So if you can be prepared, you can make the most of your 10 minutes. But a lot of people don't know where to start.
We have the same issue. I think that the medical profession is feeling the heat because it's falling on GYNs, and they're not trained. Medical providers in the United States get about an hour of menopause training in their entire medical training. They can get additional menopause training. But those doctors are now booked because people are going to these menopause providers. There are more online healthcare providers coming on. But I think it's really important to sort of assess the doctor's training and are they the right fit? And it can't be just in one visit. This is the thing. You have somebody who's 40 years old who may have had numerous children. That's a lot to go through. And then because estrogen and because menopause impacts so much of the body, it is really important to, it's not just one provider. I don't know what the healthcare system there is like in terms of seeing multiple providers, but in the United States, it's very siloed. So you have your GP, but then you also have your GYN, and then you might have your cardiologist, and they might not even be talking to each other. We're a little bit of a mess here.
No, I'm afraid it's very similar here in that we have the wonderful National Health Service. So we have the system that is free for people to access, and your GP falls under that. And then if you need to go to hospital, you have whoever you need there. But getting the two to communicate, and then if you add an independent provider that you pay for as well, which many people are for menopause, certainly if they're able to afford it, then the cross communication is a challenge at best. No, I think we all share similar problems.
And I think that's one of the things I see in my practice is health anxiety and not knowing what it is, and then it really increases the symptoms. And you said before just sort of about knowing what's what, because a panic attack can feel like a hot flash, and hot flashes can cause panic. And so a lot of times people are worrying about things that are really menopause, but also you need to rule those things out. It's not that you don't need to rule those things out, right? You do. But it can be it's complicated. It's not this easy thing to figure out.
Again, it's all nuance and what's happening in your life. It can be a very stressful period of life if you have kids or elderly parents. Work stresses. The world at the moment is a stressful place. So could it be burnout? Could it be stress? Could it be menopause? And not ruling out something that could be significant, but equally feeling a little bit lighter about something that then doesn't turn out to be a heart attack. It is just heart palpitations.
Right.
And I say just, they're horrible. But if you know what it is, it's, I see words are falling out of my head as we speak. This has got worse.
That's a symptom. Yeah. But you just did what I do as well. You just say it. You just say, "Oh, I'm having trouble finding that word." Right? That is CBT. It's sort of just like, "Oh, that's what's happening right now." That's what it's just acknowledging it.
Yes.
Right? And it happens to us. It happens to me all the time. And sometimes I'm like, some things will come out of my mouth and I'm like, how did I remember that? And then the next minute I can't remember a basic word.
That's such a relief to
So
hear.
bizarre.
It really is, because I do sit here and think, oh, these people must think I'm a fool. But yeah, words and they're there somewhere. They will appear later on tonight.
That's right. When you're more relaxed,
Yes.
right? When you feel less stress about it, right? So it's like that. It's that beating yourself up,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I'm not a hokey therapist at all. I'm one of those like not, and I used to hate the word self compassion because I just was like, oh, that just sounds so like weird and like not. But really, what it is, it's like, oh, I'm having a hard time right now, or like, oh, I'm having trouble finding words. That's frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
That's being like just that. It's not like, oh my gosh, I feel sorry. It's just like acknowledging it and just saying like, oh, I'm having a hard time. Oh, I don't feel that great today. It's not a great day. That's self compassion.
Yeah.
And I'm running a support group at NYU, not the hospital, but the school. And it's amazing because I think word finding is one of the symptoms that people talk about a lot
Mm-hmm.
there. People feel less capable, just sort of like what was happening, what you say to yourself, right? And what you say to yourself matters. And that's what CBT is. It's just sort of noticing what you say to yourself, right? And just tweaking it a little bit. A lot of times people say CBT is like challenging those
Mm-hmm.
thoughts. I see it more as like noticing them and deciding kind of not to pay as much attention to them. Like, oh, there's that thought again, right? And then saying like, oh, wow, I'm being really hard on myself. You're being hard on yourself about that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you've been amazing, right? CBT is like everything. It's like, it's just how we talk to ourselves. And women in particular, we're so hard on ourselves and we don't need to.
Being able to give yourself a break just for the
Yeah,
tiniest thing. And yes, exactly what you've explained. That is
yeah,
a gift to so many women.
it
It
really
really
is.
is. Is this part of Brooklyn Counseling? And can you tell us a little bit about your practice?
Sure. So I've had my private practice for years and years, I would say over 30 years. And it started when I was working in an agency, and then I started to have children, and I started a private practice. And then it grew into working more with women because I found that a lot of my friends needed support. And then I just had this idea, and I was like, I also wanted to see people during the day because my kids were, little and in school. And so it's really just me. And I took a little bit of a break from it when I went to the Motherhood Center, but I still kept like one or two people during that time. And then I rebuilt it um, really at the same time that I started Let's Talk Menopause. And I see a variety of women from fertility, pregnancy, postpartum, and I do see a lot of women in menopause. Um, and it's really helped me. I always have found that I learn from people and I grow from their experiences and understanding that, the differences and how, and what works and what doesn't work, and knowing that like what works for somebody might not work for somebody else. So I am an end person. Some people are really adamant against medication and sometimes they need it. And sometimes skills are not enough. And sometimes after 3 months, 4 months, I'm like, okay, so, what's this fight about? Like, why wouldn't you make it a little bit easier for yourself, or why not try it? I would just like people to have a little bit more of an open mind about everything. CBT, medication, hormones, like, right? Again, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It doesn't have to be one thing or it can be an end. There's choices. And I actually would say that CBT is the number one because it actually teaches you that you have choices, that it's not that all or nothing thinking.
Women need choice.
Yeah, you need choices and you need to be open minded about it. And sometimes tolerating some things that might be difficult for you. So my private practice is small. With it, I'm running this support group and learning a lot. I always have ideas about doing more and training professionals, and because not only do we need to train doctors, physicians, nurses, we need to train psychiatrists, social workers, mental health counselors, physical therapists, occupational. There is so much training that we need to do around menopause
Mm.
because it really gets messy. There are very few therapists I know that specialize in menopause. There's a handful. That's it. I mean, in the whole United States. And so I just worry, right? I worry that, people are, 50 something and they're experiencing things and no one's even talking to them about that this could be menopause. That's happening all over.
One of the things that has come up repeatedly in these interviews as well is the way that perimenopause has the ability to shine the light on everything that you haven't dealt with in your life, even if you think you have, and maybe you have done some work and some of it has resolved. Those little tails are going to come back, and it now is a really good time to address whatever it is that might be concerning you.
That's a really good point. Well, I see it as this is a time of vulnerability and a time of opportunity.
Yes.
Because often in a crisis, right, there's an opportunity to shift and change. And I have definitely seen that with my menopausal clients, that it has been a really intense process because they came to me highly symptomatic, not knowing what was going on. And it's hard to know. And sometimes that wanting to know what it is gets in the way of actually getting better. Because it's like, is this menopause? Is this hormones? Is this the pandemic? Is this my kids leaving? Yes, 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 yes. Right. And what do we do now?
So where would you start if somebody is feeling all of those things and they're trying to unpick what is it and how do I move forwards? Where would you start? Would you go straight away onto the medication to take the edge off, or would you go in from a different angle?
Well, I really think that really depends on the client and where they're at. I mean, if somebody is not functioning and they have neurovegetative symptoms, which is like they're not sleeping or eating, then of course you have to go to medication because that your brain actually should not stay in that state. It needs to be pulled out. But where I really start is just basic skills, how to cope in the moment, right? So if somebody's having a lot of hot flashes and they're really distressed by them and they don't know what they are, I'll do basic education about that. But also I match physical to physical, right? So we start with like the physical coping skills. So, when you're hot, splashing cold water on your face, going outside, having a bag of ice, and labeling what you're experiencing, right? So like I'm having a hot flash right now. Labeling is actually a really important skill that people don't know. It's like, oh, I'm having an anxious thought that I have a terrible disease. I have an anxious thought that this is going to last forever. I'm never going to feel like myself again. And so labeling those as thoughts instead of who you are, right? So feelings are not facts. They're not who you are. So like you feel embarrassed, right? Maybe about not finding a word. You're not an embarrassing person. You're just having a mental lapse of a word. It's a fact, right? So really I start where they are and what they need. And I will refer to other providers if I need, a psychiatrist, mental health psychiatrist or nurse practitioner, to a, menopause provider, so that we can then coordinate. But, people pay out of pocket for me. I send claims for people. They get, hopefully get reimbursed because I have this expertise, because this is how I earn my living, right? But I wish that everyone had access to a menopause-informed therapist as well, because I do think that having someone like that to help navigate the system, right, about what is anxiety, what is health, what do you, what's going on. And I will say that one of the best skills is just saying like, oh, I'm having trouble with that word. And I know I used it on myself. So in the beginning, when I was having a ton of hot flashes, I would sort of just, I'd be at dinner. And one of the things about hot flashes, for me at least, is I had to move. It just like was so uncomfortable that I had to get up out of my chair. And so it was during the pandemic. And my kids were like, yeah, Mom, we know you're having another hot flash. Like, woe is you, And I would just kind of be agitated by my hot flashes. You know what I mean? I was sort of like, oh, like this is so annoying and frustrating, And so finally I was like, okay, my kids are getting sick of me. I'm kind of getting sick of myself, right? And I just said like, okay, I'm having a hot flash right now, like in a more neutral tone. I know what this is and it's going to pass. And I just told my kids like, you know what? I got to get up for a minute. I got to go outside and then I'm going to come back and I'm fine. But I didn't like moan and groan about it anymore. And that really actually helped. So in some ways I just like owned my symptoms or just like accept. So radical acceptance is another skill, right? So this is going to happen to you. You're a woman, you're like you are going to go through menopause. Are you going to have a lot of symptoms? I don't know. Right? But you may. But it's going to happen. You're going to get older. You're going to go through this phase of life. You're not going to look the same, right? You're not going to go back to being 25. And unfortunately, our society like wants us to look like we did when we were 30. And that's just not going to happen. And so if you accept that, right? And it's not that you're going to like, shrivel up and, not do anything for yourself to help yourself feel better, but you're not going to look like you did when you were X age. And the more you fight that, like if you're fighting that, you're going to have a harder time.
The way you view everything can change it into the worst 5 minutes of your life or whatever it might be, or just something that's happening and then you move along, or, maybe even something positive, which I know we're all trying for really is to make menopause more of an opportunity and less of an endurance.
Yeah.
You do have the bill next week going to Congress. Does that include education of medical professionals?
So right now, the bill, the Menopause Research and Equity Act, includes money to menopause research. That's what it includes right now. There's another few members of Congress who are doing a separate bill who want to do that. I don't know if that's going to go anywhere. I think we're starting here. I think we need to start with getting more money for research. That's what's needed. We can win this. I think we can get this. I think people can agree that money is needed, for the NIH. There's money already there. It's unallocated and it needs to go. So it's not like adding more money. Our political system is not so great right now. And so, to say the least. I think we're figuring it out. I was at a meeting this past week, Tuesday in Washington, D.C. with leaders in the field, people from the White House. There was a few members of Congress there. And it was a roundtable to really get the discussion going at a higher level about what needs to happen. So certainly we need to figure out how to get medical schools to do more. And we need to figure out, to get some of the treatments covered. I mean, you are way ahead there in terms of hormone therapy being covered by insurance and maybe even not needing a prescription, but we are not there in any way. So we have a really long way to go.
Finally, Donna, what is the greatest lesson that menopause has taught you that you would like to share with other women?
So I would say to go big, own it and embrace it. And this does not mean that you don't get help, right? Like, so when I was talking before about hot flashes, it's in the moment acceptance. And it doesn't mean like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to do anything for my hot flashes. I'm not going to suffer, right? But owning it means like embracing it, figuring it out, tackle it. Don't be afraid of it. Advocate for yourself because you deserve to feel good in life.
That's wonderful. And I agree. Go big is brilliant advice.
Thank you.
Where can people find you? I will put all the details on the show notes.
So you can visit our website, letstalkmenopause.org. We have tons of resources there, from our menopause talks to our public ad campaigns to our Ask the Expert. People can also, we have a podcast, Hello Menopause. You can find it anywhere that you listen to your podcasts. And then also on social media. Our handle is Let's Talk Menopause. So it's very easy to find us, and we are big and bold. You won't be able to miss us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you for your time and your information and general conversation, Donna. It has been a real pleasure.
Thank you, Hattie. It was really nice to be on. I appreciate it.
I will leave all the details of where to find Donna and Let's Talk Menopause in the show notes. At the time of release, you can still fill out a form on their website that allows you to write directly to your member of Congress if you live in the US. The Menopause Research and Equity Act 2023 needs all the signatures you can get, so I will leave it as a clickable link to make it as simple as possible. And a final note on Real Menopause Therapy, subscription remains free for now and sign up is obligation free as well. So you can simply sign up and have a look around to see how it works and see what therapists are available for you. Go to bit.ly/RM therapy, that's bit.ly/RM therapy, capital R, capital M, capital T, or go to the clickable link also in the show notes. That's a wrap for season 5. We have some amazing guests coming up for season 6, so stay posted. My new website is live, which I am delighted about. The therapy is there, the podcast is there, and the workplace training is there. You can sign up on the website for the newsletter and to stay up to date on the latest podcast drops. And as always, you can drop me a line. Thank you to each and every one of you for listening for 5 whole seasons now. I very much look forward to seeing you in season 6.